I'm not easily swayed by hype. A lifetime of watching games promise the world and deliver an empty parking lot has made me a hardened skeptic. Yet when I, the grumpy critic who rolls his eyes at everything, tell you that 2026 has me genuinely, truly excited, you need to pay attention. Forget the hype and the hope. These 10 PS5 titles are the real deal. From blockbusters like GTA 6 and Wolverine to surprise hits you haven't even heard of, these games are poised to completely blow your mind. Even I can't deny it anymore. Let's dive in. Alright, this one, I'm genuinely watching like a hawk. So here's the deal. This is coming from Pearl Abyss. Yes, the same studio behind Black Desert Online, the game where people unironically spent 3 hours perfecting eyebrow curvature before touching a quest. Their character creator was basically a lifestyle. But Crimson Desert? Whole different energy. You play as Cliff, not Cliff, small correction, a mercenary captain dragged into a brutal, war-torn continent called Pywell. And this isn't some small, boxed-in RPG map. It's a massive open world packed with siege battles, roaming factions, political mess, and creatures that look like they bench-press castles for fun. And the monsters? Not RPG Goblin number 4. We're talking screen-filling, earthquake-causing, blink-and-you're-dead type beasts. The combat looks heavy and physical. Grapples, throws, brutal counters, environmental destruction. It's flashy without looking floaty. Every hit seems to have weight behind it, like armor actually has mass. It gives that cinematic, high-production action vibe instead of MMO button-mashing chaos. And visually? Yeah, it's ridiculous. Unreal Engine level lighting, dynamic weather, detailed armor, wide landscapes that make you just want to stop moving and pan the camera for no reason. If the final game looks anywhere close to the trailers, screenshot folders are about to suffer. Now here's the cautious part. Pearl Abyss has a history of aggressive monetization systems in their online games. Cosmetics, convenience items, that whole ecosystem. Crimson Desert was originally pitched as an MMO, then reworked into a single-player open-world action RPG. So the big question is, how clean is it going to be? If this launches as a proper single-player experience without live service hooks digging into your wallet, we could be looking at something genuinely special. Big budget, story-driven fantasy with actual ambition behind it. And if you're someone who gets excited maybe once a year when a game feels like it actually has scale and confidence behind it, yeah, this is one of those. Okay, turn off the lights and shut off your fan because we need to talk about Resident Evil Requiem. Capcom has been on an absolute roll lately with their survival horror titles, and the recent entries have been genuinely terrifying and incredibly fun to play. But for this 9th mainline installment, they are completely changing the formula and finally letting Ethan Winters rest. His storyline wrapped up with Village, and honestly, the guy earned his retirement after losing his hand multiple times and taking so much punishment. Instead of bringing Ethan back, Requiem gives us 2 protagonists and 2 completely different styles of gameplay set around 30 years after the Raccoon City incident. We get the return of Leon Kennedy for the heavy combat and shooting segments in third person. That covers the action side. But the part that really caught my attention is the other half of the campaign. You play as a new FBI analyst named Grace Ashcroft, and her sections are played in first person with a heavy focus on pure survival horror. She investigates a condemned hotel, and her gameplay is entirely about vulnerability. You have to hide under tables, sneak around to avoid making noise, and rely on a lighter to see in the dark while a stalker enemy hunts you through the walls. That is exactly the kind of terrifying experience I want from this franchise. As much as I enjoyed the last game, running away from a giant mutant baby in a factory felt a little too weird after a while. I want a horror game that forces me to pause, walk away from my desk, go to the kitchen for a glass of water, take a deep breath, and calm my nerves before picking up the controller again. Grace's gameplay looks like it will deliver exactly that kind of oppressive fear, where you are counting every single bullet and constantly looking over your shoulder. Capcom knows exactly what they're doing right now, and given their recent track record, I fully expect them to nail the execution. Please do not mess this up, Capcom. So yes, this is real, and honestly, this might be the smartest direction they could have taken. Legacy of Atlantis is a full remake of the original 1996 Tomb Raider, rebuilt from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5. Crystal Dynamics is leading the project, with support from Flying Wild Hog. The goal isn't to reinvent Lara again, it's to modernize her very first adventure without losing what made it iconic. That means we're going back to the Scion, back to Peru, back to Greece, back to Egypt, and eventually back to Atlantis. The original game was pure adventure, isolation, massive tombs that felt ancient and dangerous, minimal handholding. You weren't sprinting through collapsing set pieces every 5 minutes. You were solving giant environmental puzzles, lining up mechanisms, exploring spaces that felt forgotten. And that's what makes this remake exciting. The Survivor trilogy, Tomb Raider 2013, Rise, Shadow, did an incredible job humanizing Lara. They gave her depth, vulnerability, emotional weight. But they were intense, constant crisis, constant trauma, constant urgency. Legacy of Atlantis has the opportunity to rebalance that. Let Lara be clever. Let her be confident. Let her enjoy the discovery. The original Lara wasn't miserable. She was curious, capable, and slightly fearless in a way that made exploring these places feel empowering. With Unreal Engine 5, the tombs can finally look the way they felt in 1996. Enormous, atmospheric, intimidating. Imagine St. Francis Folly or the Lost Valley, rebuilt with modern lighting, real vertical scale, detailed stonework, actual environmental storytelling. And if they commit to smart puzzle design instead of overscripted spectacle, this could bring back something we've been missing: real tomb raiding. Not constant crumbling floors, not non-stop cinematic chaos, actual exploration. They've also cast Alex Wilton Regan as Lara, which signals a fresh performance while still respecting the character's legacy. That alone suggests they're aiming for a version of Lara that feels adventurous rather than constantly burdened. If they nail the balance, modern combat polish, meaningful puzzles, atmospheric level design, and a Lara who feels alive and sharp, this could be the definitive way to experience her origin story. If they turn it into another 12-hour emotional endurance test, then yeah, people are going to notice. But right now, this is the kind of remake that actually makes sense. I need a second to process Phantom Blade Zero because the gameplay S-Game has been showing off is absolutely wild. They're building this entirely new vibe they call Kung Fu Punk, throwing traditional Chinese martial arts into a dark fantasy world. The story follows an elite assassin named Soul, who only has 66 days left to live, and he's using that time to hunt down the group that framed him for murder. The speed of the combat is completely off the charts. You're basically playing through the most insane wuxia sword choreography you have ever seen at a blistering pace. You have to constantly switch between attacking and defending, managing a stamina system called shachi to pull off perfect dodges, parries, and these brutal cinematic finishers. It genuinely looks like a top-tier martial arts movie where you hold the controller. You'll be chilling on your couch, pulling off moves that look impossible, flowing straight from a last-second block right into a flurry of sword strikes. My usual fear with trailers that look this flashy is the actual hands-on gameplay. We've all been tricked by titles that look beautiful in videos, but feel like steering a heavy shopping cart through wet cement when you actually play them. I always worry the controls are going to end up feeling clunky and slow. The good news is the developers brought in real martial arts choreographers for the motion capture, and everyone who played the demo said the fluidity feels incredible. The combat needs actual timing and awareness instead of just mashing the attack button over and over. If they can maintain this level of quality for the full release, this could easily be the standout AAA action release of the year. It drops in September, and I am definitely keeping my eye on it. It takes a lot to impress me lately, but this team is putting together something really special. Okay, deep breath. James Bond games have had a rough couple decades. After GoldenEye 007 rewired everyone's brain in the late 90s, it's been a long stretch of this could have been cool energy. A few decent attempts, sure, but nothing that really captured the fantasy of being Bond in a modern way. Now here's why 007 First Light actually feels different. It's being developed by IO Interactive, the Hitman people, the studio behind the modern Hitman 3 trilogy. And if there's one thing IO understands, it's how to design a sandbox where patience, creativity, and style matter. Think about it. The Hitman games are built around social stealth, carefully staged assassinations, letting the player plan instead of just react, giving you freedom instead of railroading you. That already sounds more Bond than most Bond games ever did. 007 First Light is also an origin story. This isn't adapting a movie. There's no actor likeness to work around, no studio breathing down their neck about canon accuracy. It's a young Bond earning his 00 status, which means they get to build their own tone, their own look, their own version of the character. That freedom is huge. Because when you're not copying a film plot beat for beat, you can actually design missions that feel like espionage, infiltrating high-security galas, manipulating targets, using gadgets in clever ways, escaping before things spiral out of control. And IO Interactive understands controlled chaos better than almost anyone. Now, this doesn't automatically mean it'll be amazing. Designing a stealth sandbox around Agent 47 is different from designing one around James Bond. Bond talks more, Bond charms, Bond improvises loudly sometimes. The game needs personality, not just systems. But if they combine Hitman-level mission design with cinematic action beats and a real spy intrigue, this is easily the most promising Bond project in 20 years. Because Bond works best when he's stylish, intelligent, and 3 steps ahead, not just running down corridors shooting wave after wave of generic enemies. Right now, this feels like the first time in a long time that a Bond game has the right studio behind it. And yeah, that tiny, fragile optimism, it's there. Let me tell you a little bit of history before we get into the details. Back in the day, the creator of the original Fable series was famous for making some incredibly wild promises about his projects. He would stand on a stage and swear you could do absolutely anything you wanted in his world. When those older titles finally released, they were genuinely good and full of charm, even if they fell short of those impossible miracles. You could become a legendary hero, turn into a complete villain, or just spend hours wandering around a quiet village kicking chickens. It was a core gameplay mechanic, and fans loved it. Now, we are looking at a complete reboot being developed by Playground Games. They are the studio famous for the Forza Horizon racing series. Having a team known purely for fast cars take over a beloved fantasy RPG franchise sounds like asking your math teacher to coach the track team. It sounds a bit strange on paper. But when you remember that Playground is phenomenal at building gorgeous, highly detailed open worlds, the decision starts to make a lot of sense. They are taking all that technical talent and aiming it straight at a magical kingdom called Albion. They're even using their in-house Forza Tech engine to make it happen. The new trailers look absolutely beautiful, capturing that classic silly British humor perfectly while adding a modern level of polish. They're completely rebuilding the morality system around choice and consequence, where your local reputation changes how different towns react to you. My main concern with this project is the development timeline. They have been working on this for what feels like an eternity, having started planning way back around 2018. Usually, when a project stays in the oven for that many years, it either launches as a complete masterpiece or a broken mess with zero middle ground. They officially confirmed it is launching in autumn 2026, and surprisingly, it's dropping simultaneously on PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and PC. I am keeping my expectations carefully managed because I have been let down by long development cycles before. I really hope they pull it off and deliver the AAA fantasy experience we've been waiting for. Alright, focus. This is being made by Insomniac Games, the same studio that gave us Marvel's Spider-Man and Marvel's Spider-Man 2. In those games, they understood something most superhero games don't. They made you feel like the character. The movement, the heart, the spectacle, it all clicked. So when they announced Wolverine, yeah, that wasn't a normal reaction. That was a sit-up-straight immediately moment. Because Logan is a completely different beast. Spider-Man is acrobatic, hopeful, trying to do the right thing even when it costs him. Wolverine, he's sharp edges and scars. He heals from almost anything, carries decades of trauma, and solves problems with claws that slide out of his hands. Subtlety is optional, anger is default. And Insomniac has already confirmed this one will be more mature in tone. That makes sense. You can't make a Wolverine game where enemies politely fall asleep. What makes this exciting isn't just the violence, it's the potential for intensity. Imagine combat that feels weighty and brutal, close quarters brawls, environmental destruction, healing in real time as you push forward instead of backing off. A character who fights like he wants to get hit because he knows he'll stand back up. If Insomniac can do for claw-based combat what they did for web swinging, that's dangerous levels of hype. But here's the delicate part. Wolverine works because he's more than rage. Underneath the growling and the metal skeleton, there's guilt, loyalty, protectiveness, a guy who pretends he doesn't care, but absolutely does. If the story leans too hard into grim, gloomy, edge for the sake of edge, it misses the point. The best versions of Logan, whether in comics or films, balance brutality with humanity. Give us the unstoppable wrecking machine. Give us the savage combat. But also give us the quiet moments, the reluctant hero, the angry Canadian who would never admit he has a heart. Insomniac has earned trust. They know pacing, they know character, they know how to make a superhero game feel premium instead of disposable. Now, they just have to stick the landing. No pressure. Before getting into the details of the Blood of Dawnwalker, I need to give you some background on the team making it. If you have played The Witcher 3, you know it is considered one of the greatest RPGs ever made, setting an incredibly high standard for storytelling that most other studios are still trying to match. A group of the developers who worked on that masterpiece, including the game director, left to form their own independent studio called Rebel Wolves. They are aiming to deliver a AAA dark fantasy experience set in a 14th century version of Europe where vampires have overthrown the local rulers. Since this is their debut project, it is definitely something you need to keep your eyes on. The pedigree of the development team alone makes it worth watching, especially since they are focusing purely on a single-player narrative sandbox. In this adventure, you take on the role of Cohen, who is a Dawnwalker. That means he is human during the day and turns into a terrifying lethal vampire at night. We're talking about the scary, brutal kind of creature of the night that uses claws and supernatural abilities to rip enemies apart, completely far removed from the romanticized vampires you see in movies. Your main goal is to save your family, but the standout feature is how the development team handles time. You are given exactly 30 in-game days and nights to complete your objective. Every major quest you finish pushes the clock forward, meaning you have to choose your activities carefully because you will not have time to do absolutely everything. I really appreciate mechanics that put actual pressure on the player and force you to make tough decisions instead of just blindly doing every single side quest on the map without any consequences. You still have plenty of time to explore the open world without the clock ticking down, but the narrative choices carry real weight. Even with all that incredible talent behind it, I still have to keep my expectations grounded since this is the very first release from a brand new studio. Putting your trust in a newly formed team is always a bit risky, kind of like eating at a brand new restaurant on opening night. You might get the greatest meal of your life, or the food could be cold and the service could be a mess. The concept of balancing sword combat during the day with stealth and blood magic at night sounds fantastic on paper, and the Unreal Engine 5 visuals look beautiful. The talent is clearly there, and the core idea is incredibly strong. I am keeping my guard up just a bit until I actually have the controller in my hands and can feel how it plays for myself. I'm really hoping Rebel Wolves proves my doubts wrong and delivers something spectacular. Okay, lock in for a second. If the first Control felt like being trapped inside a government building that hated you, Resonant looks like the building escaped and swallowed a city. This time, we're not just wandering the oldest house throwing office furniture at possessed employees. The setting expands into a warped version of Manhattan where reality itself is breaking down. Streets bend, gravity misbehaves, architecture folds in on itself like the world forgot how to be solid. It's bigger, louder, and way more unstable. And the biggest twist? You're playing as Dylan Faden now, not Jesse. That alone changes the entire tone. Dylan has always been the wild card in this universe, less composed, less controlled, which feels very intentional for a sequel that seems more aggressive and action-focused. Combat is evolving too. The first game made telekinesis feel incredible. If it wasn't bolted down, it was a projectile. Resonant pushes things further with a heavier emphasis on close-quarters combat and a shape-shifting melee weapon called the Aberrant. Think less office telekinesis simulator and more supernatural brawler where the environment is constantly collapsing around you. And if there's one thing Remedy Entertainment knows how to do right now, it's atmosphere. After Alan Wake 2, they're operating with serious confidence. They understand surreal horror. They understand pacing. They understand how to make weird feel deliberate instead of random noise. Now, here's the one thing I'm begging for. The first Control had incredible lore, fascinating, layered, ambitious, but sometimes it felt like you needed a PhD in paranatural bureaucracy to follow it. Between the board, the astral plane, altered world events, there were moments where your brain just quietly tapped out. So Resonant, keep the strangeness, keep the shifting reality, keep the unsettling, clinical, this government agency should not exist energy. Just give us a story thread that feels sharper, cleaner, something we can emotionally grab onto while the world melts sideways. because when control works, it's unforgettable. It feels like a lucid nightmare where you're somehow the most dangerous thing in the room. And if Resonant doubles down on that, bigger scale, tighter narrative, more brutal powers, this could turn into Remedy's defining series. Throw me through a floating skyscraper, bend gravity, break Manhattan. Just let me understand what's happening while you do it. And finally, we arrive at the biggest release on the board. The one title the entire gaming community has been holding their breath for is Grand Theft Auto 6. We have been waiting 13 long years since GTA 5 first dropped. Rockstar Games has spent all that time happily re-releasing the fifth entry across 3 different console generations and making an absolute mountain of money. You cannot really blame them for cashing in, but it is a huge relief that the 6th installment is finally on the horizon. They're taking us back to Vice City in the state of Leonida, which is basically a heavily detailed version of modern Florida. The map is packed with sunny beaches, swamps full of alligators, and endless opportunities for chaotic crime. For the first time in the modern era of the franchise, we are stepping into the shoes of a female protagonist named Lucia. She's teaming up with her partner Jason for a wild crime spree across the state. The setup sounds exactly like the kind of gritty narrative Rockstar excels at telling. The debut trailer broke actual Guinness World Records on YouTube, pulling in over 90 million views in its first 24 hours. That alone proves just how many millions of people are desperate to get their hands on it. I have to be honest about the expectations, though. The pressure riding on this release is heavier than anything we have ever seen in the history of the industry. Fans are fully expecting it to redefine the entire open-world genre all over again. Carrying that kind of expectation is a heavy burden for any studio. Rockstar is one of the few developers capable of pulling it off, considering they gave us Red Dead Redemption 2, which is arguably one of the greatest technical achievements in gaming. Even the best teams stumble sometimes, but their track record speaks for itself. They recently confirmed the release date is set for November 19th, 2026, to make sure it has the right amount of polish. I just hope we don't end up waiting another 13 years for the 7th entry, because my patience will not last that long. That wraps up the list of 10 titles that show exactly why 2026 has the potential to be an incredible year for the PS5. Notice I'm saying it has the potential. I refuse to guarantee anything because I've been let down way too many times in the past. The second someone promises a perfect year, a highly anticipated release gets delayed, or a studio makes a terrible design choice. I prefer to keep my guard up and manage my expectations. But if even half of the titles we talked about actually deliver on the promises they're making, we're going to be eating incredibly well for the next 12 months. We are talking about a full course meal with extra dessert. Do me a favor and hit the subscribe button to support the channel. Also, leave a comment letting me know which release you are looking forward to the most. I'll read through your picks, give them some careful thought, and then kindly explain why your choice is completely incorrect.